Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for this webinar in the Good Mind Nurturing Nature series. We seek to explore the Zoroastrian perspective on sustainable development for progress together in a fellowship to advance with nature and with each other, in harmony, in a balance, looking at the golden mean, so that we look at neurocognitive principles, ecological principles, and all the principles to do with knowledge, entrepreneurship, intellectual wealth, economic wealth, social wealth, and ecological wealth. This webinar is supported by Mr. Yazdi Tantra through his website and his endeavor for over 10 years, which is on www.zoroastrians.net. It's coordinated by myself, Karishma Koka, and this is my mummy, Jaru, with us. And we have everybody and their families and all the scholars around the world in different fields. So while we are recording this, and we note that each one is enjoined by the supreme wisdom to share their own vision, their own thoughts, and think individually with responsibility, we are putting to you a thought by our teachers today, Farrokh Mistree and Khojeste P. But before that, the teacher prophet Asho Zarathustra has given us a wealth of knowledge in his songs of revelation, the Gathas. In the first verse of the Gathas, Asho Zarathustra teaches us that righteous action, deeds, done with the wisdom of the good mind, to please the soul of all creation. Different translations will say the universe, the cow, but everything. So when we say good thoughts, good words, good deeds, it is really all righteous deeds with the wisdom of the good mind, in my understanding, in one perspective. So this good mind allows us to work harmoniously with nature. Now, we have seen in the recent past, we've had floods in Maharashtra, floods in Germany. Nature had cried out for help, as at the very beginning of the Gathas. And it is said that Asho Zarathustra and his wisdom was given to us to help us through this. It's something we all realize today as we take on our individual and fellowship roles of collective responsibility and consciousness, that when something strikes, although we work together to mitigate and manage risk, we use good choices and we try for fairness. When something hits us, it is always the least resourceful people with the least amount of resources and strength who are affected the most in the negative light of nature's fury, if we like to say it that way. So in the most important prayer of the Zartushti Dhyana, the consciousness, the conscience, our own inner light, we say righteousness and the wisdom of the good mind to help us generate deeds of life for our Mazda, to bring responsible dominion and strength. Our role is to be the Vastarin, the leader, to help those in need, including Mother Earth, including the people with less knowledge, everybody with less resources. And we say, happiness comes to those who bring happiness to others. So Zartushtis are guided to take righteous action and to share happiness and harmony with others. Finally, we say in so many prayers, so it's not really prayers, it's guidance as well. I bless the entire righteous creation. Afrinami Vispau Ashauno Stoish. We have people of various different faiths with us today and people of no faith, people from different parts of the world. And as I've seen and listened and reflected from my childhood, this idea is in everything, in science as well. And we work towards all righteous creations as caregivers on the pastures of righteousness and the good mind. And as I see it, when we use the good mind to take action to work holistically, the gift of the good mind comes to us in return. As we nurture others, we are nurtured too. Our panelists for the day are Khojeste Mistree and Farrokh Mistree. And in the context of the good mind nurturing nature, they will share their thoughts. Khojeste will highlight principles anchored in the Zoroastrian doctrine and practice that are foundational to sustainable development, when harmony and perfection are seen as the final goal. Farrokh will then relate what Khojeste shares by way of the natural matrix of the 7 creations and put them into context with the United Nations 17 Sustainable Development Goals and how these are put into practice by a social entrepreneur, Mr. Ashok Das of Sun Moksha. I'll give you now a brief introduction to both our speakers, who are brothers. Khojeste's interests are directed towards preserving the Zoroastrian faith's traditions and practices and sharing them and teaching us. He has an honors degree in Oriental Studies from the University of Oxford. His focus was on Zoroastrianism under the tutelage of Professor Mary Boyce. He's co-founded Zoroastrian Studies, the Arthravan Educational Trust in Mumbai, and the World Alliance for Parsi Irani Zartushtis, WAPIS. He was elected trustee of the Bombay Parsi Panchayat, the apex body of the Zoroastrian community, where he served from 2008 to 2015. Under the auspices of the Arthravan Educational Trust, Khojeste has taught the theology and the ritual practices of the faith to ordained priests and members of the laity who undertake quasi-priestly duties. Khojeste has delivered over 1,200 invited talks over the past decades and has read papers at universities across the world. He takes workshops, seminars on Zoroastrianism at various institutions in India and abroad. Khojeste is often an interviewee in the print media, on radio, television, including the BBC, CNN, PBS, the French, German, and Indian television on Zoroastrianism and Parsi affairs. He's a frequent visitor to Iran, and his work has led to encouraging and supporting the practices of the faith. In the 1980s, he spearheaded a resettlement program of displaced Zoroastrians from Iran, seeking refuge status in the United States and Canada. He's the author of Zoroastrianism and Ethnic Perspective and co-author of The Zarathushtri Religion, a basic text. He has had several academic publications to his name and is married with 2 children. His professional interests include water divining and land acupuncture. Now, Khojeste's brother Farrokh has a passion to have fun in providing an opportunity for highly motivated and talented people to learn how to define and achieve their dreams. He has co-authored 2 textbooks, 4 monographs, and more than 450 technical papers dealing with the co-design of materials, products, and associated manufacturing processes, the design of mechanical, thermal, and structural systems, ships and aircraft, engineering networks, and education. Farrokh and his wife, Professor Janet K. Allen, co-direct the Systems Realization Laboratory at the University of Oklahoma, Norman. The Allen-Mistree duo provide an opportunity for every member of the SRL of Open University to learn how to dream, to rise to his or her full potential, and to contribute to the scholarship associated with the realization of complex engineering systems for the betterment of humankind. Of relevance to this webinar is the duo's collaboration with Dr. Ashok Das of the social enterprise Sun Moksha. This collaboration involves deploying the United Nations 17 goals for sustainable development in a systematic, organized manner for improving the quality of life of villagers living in extreme poverty in India. And as I see it, it's a plan that can be applied in different contexts as well. Farrokh has been actively involved with the Zoroastrian community since 1974, and the duo started religious education classes for the Zoroastrian Australian Association in 1977, the Zoroastrian Association of Houston in 1981, and the Atlanta Zarathustra Anjuman in 1992. Farrokh was an active instructor from 1974 to 2001. Currently, Farrokh, on behalf of the World Zoroastrian Chamber of Commerce, is the coordinator of the Zoroastrian Faculty Network, where there are monthly webinar series aimed at facilitating conversations between parents and their children, so that the next generation of Zoroastrians learn how to create economic, social, and intellectual value. Janet and Farrokh are also parents to two boys, Dinsha and Behram, and I'd like to add are academic parents to many, many scholars around the world. With that, I give gratitude to Farrokh for writing our biographies today and hand over to Khojeste to take us through his share. Khojeste, over to you.
You're muted.
Thank you very much, Karishma, for having said what you said. My talk today is basically presented in two sections. I will focus on the Zoroastrian theology linked to the good mind and touch upon the nurturing of nature, and Farrokh will pick up these themes and show the perspective of sustainable development as seen through a Zoroastrian lens. Zoroastrianism is a religion which encourages its followers to pursue and grow in wisdom and knowledge, as our Master, the Lord of Wisdom, the Wise One, is the embodiment of innate wisdom. Zoroastrianism is based upon an affirmative theology in which our Master is recognized to be the Lord of Wisdom, or the Wise One, whose specific and unique attribute is only that of wisdom itself. In an affirmative theology such as Zoroastrianism, our Master is invoked by Prophet Zarathustra in his 5 hymns, the Gathas, 195 times, with an Avestan dictionary meaning of Lord, Avestan Ahura, and wisdom, Avestan Master, as an exclusive attribute of being the wise Lord, the wise one, or the Lord of Wisdom. This concept of wisdom should not be confused with the general terminology or meaning of God, Bhagwan, Parameshwar, Allah, or Adonai in the Hebrew tradition, who are seen as supreme beings in the major religions of the world. The word God in these religions is used in a blanket sense, devoid of any specific meaning or attribute. The pre-Zoroastrian Iranians knew of the term Bhaga, which denoted the general concept of God, but with no specific meaning or attribute. Interestingly, the word Bhaga does not appear in the Avesta nor in the revelation of Zarathustra, comprising his 5 poetic hymns. Zarathustra saw our Master to be omniscient, one who is all-knowing, for he extolled, quote, that which the wise Lord, the knowing one, told me, Yasna 45:3. In his hymns, he recognized our Master to be the first one, Yasna 31:8, and the Creator, to discern thee to be the Creator of everything, Yasna 44:7. Thus it follows that if our Master is the Creator, nothing greater can exist before him. For if it did, a greater being would have had to have created our Master, which clearly is untenable. The core of Zarathustra's teachings appear to be in his apprehension of a primeval unity in a perfect world created by the one supreme, omniscient, eternal being of the good creations, Ahura Mazda. Zarathustra also recognized the need to postulate a dualism. Dualism entails the recognition of two fundamental forces, always opposed to each other, for one to understand logically the existence and the nature of evil. he declared unequivocally, quote, yes, there are two fundamental spirits who are renowned to be in conflict in thought, word, and deed. And when these two spirits first came together, they created life and death, of which the virtuous one would have spoken to the evil one. Neither our thoughts, teachings, nor intentions, neither our preferences, nor words, nor our actions, nor our thoughts, nor our souls are in accord. Yasna 33 and 45:2. Clearly, Zarathustra recognized a distinct dichotomy and separation between the forces of good and evil, for he declared, quote, evil reward to evil, good reward to good. Yasna 43:5. Evil is the antithesis of everything which is good, for it is the absence of good and antithetical to it. As Ahura Mazda, the creator of goodness and life, evil is the perpetrator of wickedness and death in both the physical and the spiritual worlds. According to the revelation, it was Ahura Mazda who, through his bounteous immortals, tasked Bahumana, the good mind, to find a person who could combat the forces of evil through his teachings. Spitema Zarathustra was identified as, quote, the only one who has heard our teachings, Yasna 29:6, and who shall put to flight fury together with the wicked, 28:2. Evil in Zarathustra's vision was the perpetrator of falsehood and destruction leading to death, for he extolled, quote, may not the deceitful one of evil doctrine destroy the world, for his evil choice through the tongue, 45:1. Evil in a dualistic paradigm can never come from Ahura Mazda, just as darkness can never come from light. Evil is the antithesis of everything good and in harmony with each other, but evil continues to exist because Ahura Mazda is not seen to be an almighty being, omnipotent yet, but mighty, 43:3, in Zoroastrian theology, embedded in this dualistic paradigm. However, if he was almighty or omnipotent, then evil and his world of wickedness, falsehood, cruelty, suffering, and death should not exist with an all-powerful God who would surely have the power to stop the forces of evil from creating disharmony and imbalance within all the creations. Moving on to the Zoroastrian creation story, evil will become ineffective and redundant when, through the righteous actions of human beings, the final renovation of the world will take place. Greater Bundarshan, chapter 34, verse 32. For this to happen, Zarathustra sought the counsel of Bahumana, Gujarati Brahman, the good mind, 45:6, whose effective father is Ahura Mazda, 45:4. Ahura Mazda protects his creations with the good mind and truth, 34:5. Importantly, the truth, Ashavahishta, Gujarati Adivesh, cannot function without the good mind, 34:8. And likewise, it is only the rule of the good mind and truth that piety, Spenta Almighty, Gujarati Spendharma, can be increased, 34:11. Piety then becomes the instrument or vehicle with the truth, which brings about rewards of wealth and a life of the good mind, 43:1. The guiding force always has to be wisdom, for the prophet extolled, quote, may the Creator through the good mind show direction in order to be the charioteer of my will and tongue. Yasna 50, verse 6. Thus the best words and deeds are action through the good mind and truth, with praise and with worship. Yasna 34:15. The Zoroastrian religion is rich in its ritual traditions of praise and worship, which are offered through the vehicle of festivals and thanksgiving ceremonies celebrated with great joy and merriment. All the seven creations are propitiated and linked to the different times of the year for the 5-day festival known as the Kambar. There are 6 seasonal Kambars linked to the sky, waters, earth, plant world, animal kingdom, and human beings, with New Year, Nowruz, celebrated as the 7th festival linked to the 7th creation of fire. In every Thanksgiving ceremony known as the Jashan, the 7 creations are propitiated, and each creation in a different order are linked to one of the 7 individual divine beings in the 30-day Zoroastrian calendar month. In Zarathustra's revelation, each of the other divine beings are mentioned by name with a specific attribute linked to each of them. Our master Hormuz heads the heptad of divine beings. Our master is assisted by Vahumana, Brahman, the good mind. Asha Vahishta, Gujarati Adivesh, the highest truth order. Kashatra Vairya, Gujarati Sharavar, desirable dominion power. Spentar Mighty, Gujarati Spendarmas, holy piety devotion. Horata, Gujarati Korda, perfection stroke completeness. And Amaratab, Gujarati Amardad, immortality stroke undyingness. All these divinities reflect an affirmative theology, with the key attribute also being the linguistic meaning of the divinity concerned. In the later Western hymn of praise, it is said, quote, all 7 of one thought, or all 7 of one speech, or all 7 of one deed, whose father and commander is the same, namely the maker, our master. Yash 19, verse 16. The nurturing of nature is an important Zoroastrian duty and obligation. The Zoroastrian perspective or lens is to maintain this harmony and balance by always nurturing the celestial creations as well as of the sun, the moon, and the stars, who are seen as overseers of the physical creations linked by the sky. It is in a later Middle Persian text known as the Bundahishn, the story of creation, where it is stated that Hormuz, the Western outer master, quote, first produced the 7 fundamental beneficent immortals, Greater Bundahishn chapter 1, verse 53. It is these 7 beneficent immortals who helped Hormuz to fashion the 7 physical creations, which Zoroastrians are enjoined to nurture and propitiate as part of Hormuz's divine plan. The 7 creations are, repeating myself, the sky, water, earth, plant world, animal kingdom, human beings, and fire. Each beneficent immortal was given the guardianship of an individual creation, with Hormuz taking on the stewardship of human beings, his 6th and finest creation. Greater Bundahishn, chapter 1a, verse 4. It is the 7th creation of fire which brought to life all the other 6 creations. Greater Bundahishn, chapter 3, verse 8. In the creation myth, it is stated that once the physical creations become dynamic and active, Ahriman, the evil spirit, attacked all the creations and brought about destruction and death into the world with the legion of thieves. According to the creation myth, this state of conflict and destruction lasted for an allegorical 3,000 years. It is at this point, because of the feedings of the soul of the cow, a Western Geushurvan Gujarati goat, mentioned in the Gathas, that Zarathustra was identified and sent into the world by Vahumana, Brahman, to battle against the forces of evil through his teachings of the faith. Greater Bundahishn, chapter 4a, verse 5. It is Vahumana, the good mind, who has the ability to grasp and discern wisdom, and then apply it in a certain order, a Western Asha, handled by Adivesh. For the prophetic soul, quote, thou didst create the wondrous powers of the good mind allied with the truth. Yasna 43:2. Wisdom through omniscience intrinsically implies all knowledge that was, is, and will be in the world of our master. It is from an omniscient being that the good mind is given the power and ability to discern and act. For Zarathustra extolled, and this is probably one of the most important verses in the Gatha, quote, listen with your ears to the best things, reflect with a clear mind, man by man for himself, upon the two choices of decision. Yasna 30, verse 2. Clearly, the two choices in this case are to choose between the two worlds of good and evil using one's good mind. Choice is based upon an ethical structure as outlined in the prophet's hymns. For Zarathustra declared, quote, him who left to our will to choose between the virtuous and the unvirtuous. Yasna 45:9. Thus, choice has to be within the bounds of being judicious. Zarathustra's message is one in which one first listens, then thinks, then decides, and thereafter acts by making the right choice using one's good mind. All the seven creations are living and interdependent upon each other within an unbreakable order in the universe. The sun rises and sets in a set pattern. The seasons transition in a fixed order, but sometimes broken by Ahriman, whose task is to create an imbalance by bringing floods, droughts, earthquakes, cyclones, etc., when seen from a Zoroastrian theological prism. Science does offer a rationale to these imbalances in nature, with solutions often to contain these evil happenings of destruction, cause, and the loss of lives. It is the good mind who enables one to infer and comprehend how to contain these imbalances through the vehicle of reason, intellect, and will, all sourced from Ahura Mazda. Thus, the desire to learn consciously through the good mind is a privilege which only human beings have, and this means that one has to take greater responsibility of looking after the beautiful physical world we live in. All the other creations operate through a mode of an intuitive order, which can also be broken by the forces of evil. Thus, the task of a Zoroastrian is to lead a purposeful life towards the betterment of the world. Human beings are enjoined to action, the seven bounteous immortals, to help one lead a structured and organized harmonious life in all that one does in this single journey of a physical existence. The key here is to use the good mind with the faculties of intellect, reason, and will, endowed with always linked to wisdom. It is from wisdom that knowledge flows processed in truth. Importantly, following the path of truth brings about a deep sense of inner happiness. This happiness must be shared not only with others, but by extension to maintain harmony in the natural world. Simply put, this is the essence of the 12-worded Hashem Bahu prayer. The gift of systematic planning and organization are unique to human beings when one uses the good mind and integrates all the key attributes of the bounteous immortals in the scheme to be undertaken. The goal should be to seek progress with the right developmental plan by bringing about harmony and balance in all that one undertakes. Progress implies creating a healthy environment for a better and happier life. In order to ensure this, development and progress have to be carefully monitored so as not to break the harmony of a master-created world. Just as human beings have the power to improve conditions in the world, they also have the ability to be a destructive force by exploiting our natural resources through the wrong use of technology, pollution, and mismanagement of our natural environment. The key here is to promote and sustain a delicate balance of harmony which resonates with nature, with the implementation of the right development, resulting in progress at a collective level of reality. Both balance and harmony are linked to the ray of endless light, the abode of Ahura Mazda, and the last day of the 30-day Zoroastrian calendar month. To conclude, our task is to purposefully work towards the renovation of the universe, the making wonderful, the Prashokiriti, by recreating a harmonious and an eternally progressive, rejuvenated environment for all to enjoy in a deathless and timeless world, void of the forces of evil, but in total resonance with the will of Ahura Mazda, the wise Lord. I now invite Farrokh to take over and elaborate on the themes which I have just introduced.
Thank you, Khojeste. Khojeste has highlighted principles of Zoroastrian doctrine that are timeless. In the context of Zoroastrian doctrine, I will highlight time-dependent principles anchored in engineering design for implementation. The principles of Zoroastrianism are timeless. What we as humans do is time-dependent. As our knowledge increases, the way in which we progress and move forward will change. To put this in context, I want to share with you a dinner I had with Sangram Mudali and Ashok Das in Bhubaneswar in July 2015. Sangram Mudali is a former student of Janata and mine, and he went back to India after getting his master's degree, and he started an institution called the National Institute of Science and Technology to educate the next generation of engineers. Sangram and Ashok were classmates at the Indian Institute of Technology, Kanpur. Ashok comes from a village in Bihar, and at this dinner, Sangram asked Ashok to tell me what he was up to. And I recall asking him, what motivates you to do this? And Ashok said that he comes from this village in Bihar. He went to IIT Kanpur, and it turns out that he got the gold medal at IIT Kanpur. He then went to the University of Southern California, got a PhD, and he worked for 15 years plus in the United States. And he then decided to go back to India to give back to the community. He went back to his village and spoke to his niece, and he said, "What can I do for you?" And his niece said, "Give me light," because there was no electricity. So here is a man who got a PhD, worked in the United States, got the US citizenship, decided to come back to India to invest and help people who lived in poverty. When I heard this, it was not what he told me he was doing, but the value, the reason why he went back to India, that struck me. So this is where the intuitive mind comes in. There is no rational reason for wanting to say, I want to work with Ashok. Intuitively, I said, this is it, let's work together. We have worked together since 2015. We have published papers. We have supervised students together. We hope to publish a book in the next couple of years. And it's been an absolutely glorious experience working with Ashok and his team. So, to tie what Ashok has done to what Khojeste talked about. So Khojeste mentioned that the humans have the power to do good and also to do evil. We as humans have polluted the environment, have affected climate change, etc., etc. We as humans have the power to remedy it. So what we are looking for is the sweet spot, and that sweet spot is called Farrokh. And you can look it up in Wikipedia in terms of what that means. The 4 points that Khojeste made from doctrine is that we must have a goal. The goal is Farrokh, long-term goal. To achieve that long-term goal, we need to be systematic in terms of how we plan. And we then need to be organized in how we deploy that plan. And then to bring about harmony, it's not a one-shot deal. We have to move systematically at each step, say, this is what I have done. Now let me listen to the impact, figure out what the impact has been of what I've done. Listen to my intuitive self that's within me, and then decide how I should proceed further. So Yasna 30.2 is very, very important. And why do I do that? That is to ensure that at every step, I promote harmony. Now let's put that in the context of people, planet, and progress. This is the definition of sustainable development. People, planet, and progress, the harmony between these three entities. Between people and planet, there is going to be tension, and the resolution of this tension needs to be bearable. Let me give you an example. We have farmers, and to grow more food, they need more land. So what do? They cut down trees, and the environment suffers. So there's a tension between the farmer wanting more land and the forest saying, hey, don't cut me down because I'm needed to prevent climate change. The resolution of that needs to be bearable. There's a tension between the social, between the planet and progress. What happens here? The resolution of this needs to be viable. For example, to remedy deforestation is going to cost a huge amount of money, but yet we want to make progress. Where is this money going to come from? So what we have to deal with is that the solution needs to be viable, small steps. Invest a little bit now, a little bit later, and see how we can progress. When we look at the tension between social and progress, the resolution needs to be equitable. What we need to ensure is the rich don't get richer and the poor don't get poorer. So if we are looking at dimensions of harmony or metrics for harmony, I suggest that our solutions need to be bearable, viable, and equitable. These are the metrics that are going to help us promote harmony between people, planet, and progress. The United Nations came up with 17 sustainable development goals. No poverty, zero hunger, good health and well-being, quality education, gender equality, clean water and sanitation, affordable and clean energy, decent work and economic growth, industry, innovation and infrastructure, reduced inequalities, sustainable cities and communities, responsible consumption and production, climate action, life below water, life on earth, peace, justice, and strong institutions and partnerships for the goals. These are 17 principles. But how would you go about deploying these principles so that in a systematic and organized way, one can achieve Frashokiriti? And this is where Ashok and his team have done a phenomenal job. Ashok looked at what was happening in the villages, and they are farmers. The number of people vary from 40 to 400. They typically live around a pond or a river, some source of water. And so, and they're single crop farmers. So he came along and he said, all right, to grow crops, I need water. To make water available, I need electricity. So if I thought of the ecosystem of creating food, then guess what? I need to be able to have an intervention dealing with water and electricity. Because then only can they grow more food. You will be giving, and this growing of food could then be the springboard for decent work and economic growth. So this is Ashok's mental model. You will see here is the human being, here is the mind, this is the mental model. At the top are people. United Nations Sustainable Development Goal 2, hunger. Goal 4, education. Goal 3, health. On the left, that is here, climate change, life below water, life on land. These are long-term things. This is what you're looking for in the long term. These are the people we need to take care of so that the long term is taken care of. The outcomes that one is looking for is a sustainable village, a smart, sustainable village, gender equality, and responsible consumption. That's what one looks at here. And the enablers, this is what Ashok came up with, which I just mentioned to you: clean energy through microgrids, economic growth through microeconomic zone development, and clean water and energy through the Aquanet, the smart Aquanet that he developed. So now if you're thinking in terms of sustainable development, we know what the goal is for Ashok. It is smart villages, economic growth, and through this, there's peace, justice, and strong institutions. So in other words, when people are happy, they will come together, there'll be strong institutions, and these institutions will move upwards, not just downwards from the center telling the state what needs to be done. To be able to achieve this, Ashok said, guess what? I have to deal with poverty, zero hunger, good health, quality education, gender equality, reduced inequalities. And guess what? If he's able to provide decent work and economic growth, then these things can be taken care of, not all at one time, but in a systematic and organized fashion. To provide decent work and economic growth, Ashok said, aha, I'm a technologist. And I mentioned to you, he put together clean water, that's the Aquanet, smart clean water, nanogrid, smart electricity, and the smart microeconomic zone, so that the goods that were created within the village could be sold for a profit. Given that this is the case, what supports it is clean water and sanitation, the affordable and clean energy, industry, innovation, and infrastructure, so people can come in and do innovation, and of course, responsible consumption. If that takes place, given that this takes place, climate action is natural. Life below water is natural because of responsible consumption. Life on land is natural. These are natural extensions of what he said, and that brings about harmony between people, planet, and profit. But that's not all. One needs partnerships, and this is a very positive thing that's taken place in India. In 2013, the BJP government passed the Corporate Social Responsibility Act, and as per that act, every business in India that makes a profit above a certain amount has to give 2% of its profit for social development. This is anchored in the idea of Jamshedji Tata when he set up the Tata Group of companies. So there is money available from industry. This government has invested a huge amount of money, or made available a huge amount of money for the upliftment of all people in India, particularly the people who live in poverty. And so there's a natural partnership between the government and industry. In comes the social entrepreneur, and the social entrepreneur is Ashok. He knows the conditions on the ground and is able to inform these other people what is needed. Let me give you an example of what happened in some of the early days. The industry came along and said, we're going to spend our corporate social responsibility money for giving people solar lanterns. After 6 months, these lanterns didn't work, and that was the end of it. Oh, we're going to build toilets in all these villages. But they didn't think it through. I visited a village in 2018, and the toilet is now used as a godown, as a storage place. Why? Because there's no running water, and it couldn't be used. So money was being misspent, well meant, but misspent in making it happen. Ashok, together with partners in the United States and the United Kingdom, is putting together a platform so that the corporate social responsibility people, the government, and the social entrepreneur can work together to come out with policies that can be implemented, monitored, and towards attaining sustainability for the villages. So this is continuous. So what we are looking for here is that over a period of time, we will attain the sustainable village. What's involved in that? That's the impact that we are seeking. And the anchor is here. The technological interventions are here. And through this focus and iteration, we hope to be there. Now let's tie sustainable development to Zoroastrianism. We are looking at a number of years. Frashakirti is another 3,000 years away. We have a 3,000-year period to make that happen, allegorically speaking, not literally. What we are looking for is a sustainable village that gives us the Frashakirti after. We have doctrine from Khojeste has talked about doctrine, and he talked about the Bundahishan and the story of creation. So now let us see how this maps into what Ashok is doing. Ashok has talked about stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage N. And at each place, he's going to make a smart intervention. And through this smart intervention, there will be economic growth and happiness for improvement of the quality of life for the villagers, taking into account the harmony between people, planet, and profit. Khojeste talked about the Bundahishan story. In Ashok's case, he's looking at people, planet, and progress. And so that is the mental model with which he's approaching it. In terms of doctrine, Khojeste has talked about the doctrine that is anchored in the Amishespentas, that is anchored in religious rituals. In Ashok's case, it's empowerment, the empowerment of people, the education of people, and providing the opportunity for entrepreneurship for the people. So with this limited set, Ashok and his team, that includes us, we are looking to have sustainable smart villages. The idea of a sustainable smart village is anchored in Pura. This is the concept that was put forward by Abdul Kalam, the former president, Abdul Kalam, who said, instead of having people go from the villages to the cities, make it possible for the villagers to stay within the cities, create the right environment so that villagers stay within the cities, so the immigration issue is settled. To give you an example of how Ashok has deployed and his team has deployed the plan, here you will see smart intervention 1, 2, 3, number of years. Ashok has worked in several villages. Chotki is the first one that we got involved with him in. And this is in a tiger reserve in Orissa. Kudgaon is an island village in a river. Maudiguda and Kantashol are two other villages he's worked on. And you will see he's come out and said for stage one, for Chotki, the first thing is to give electricity. Then, the first thing is to give electricity for domestic use, then electricity for micro entrepreneurs, and then water for agriculture. For Kudgaon, which is an island, the first thing is to give electricity for domestic use, then give them with the electricity, give them water, because even though they're in a river, the farmland is internal to the island, so it has to be taken from the river to the farmland, and then deal with a microeconomic zone so that they can sell their produce to other people and then go for other services. So this is the way in which he has organized it in a systematic and organized fashion to move forward. At the end of each stage, there's a reality check that is done. That includes Yasna 30.2, take input from outside in terms of what is happening. Listen to your intuitive self. Does this make sense? It's very important that there is a balance between the rational mind and the intuitive mind. And then decide based on values and principles and say, okay, now I'm going to implement the next stage. So this is not cast in stone. We speculate about it, and then as we go along, we tailor the plans to proceed further. Now, given the experience with the villages, I want to share with you a project that was funded through IUCN by Tata Consultancy Services. IUCN stands for International Union for the Conservation of Nature. So the lessons that have been learned from the villages, the individual villages, have been viewed by IUCN as being sufficient to fund phase one of the project for coming up with the Himalayas for the future. There are 13 states involved in Himalayas for the future. It's on the northeast border of India. It involves 5.3 lakh square kilometers, 15,000 plants and animal species. This is a major watershed for India. The Ganges River starts out here. There are about 31 million people who live in this area. And what we wish to do here is to develop the foundation for nature-based solutions that will result in significant legacy of improved social, economic, environmental conditions in the Himalayan region. So the knowledge that has been created is now being put together to help the government of India come up with a plan for taking this further. Let me give you an example. Now, tie that to pictures. Himalayas, that's the road that comes from there. In the Himalayas, there are animals, plants, trees. In that region, there are cities. There's an urban city that's going on, and the urban city wants to keep increasing its footprint. And then there are villagers who live in small pockets in this area. And so we have grouped them that way. So this is nature. This is the urban portion. This is the rural portion. And we then come along and say, what are the tensions? I took you through the tensions. What are the tensions that we wish to resolve? Forest and landscape restoration, wildlife conservation, watershed restoration, sustainable waste management, urban resilience and green infrastructure, promotion of clean energy, sustainable livelihoods and enterprise creation. So these are the seven drivers that we wish to address. There could be many more, but this is what we are addressing right now, to bring about a balance between the environment plus the social and economic. So here is a summary. These are big ideas: urban resilience and green infrastructure, wildlife conservation, cross-cutting themes. This is very important. What is it that we want to address? Mitigate climate change. 2, gender equality. 3, the promotion of useful traditional knowledge. So it's not going out there and saying, oh, we are an NGO, we know what is here, here's a solution, implement it. It is to listen to the people, to listen to the ancient wisdom. Just like Khojeste said, the Zoroastrian's wisdom is timeless. These folks also have timeless wisdom. Listen to that. With our intuitive minds, reflect on it. Think in terms of, does this make sense? What can be done? And then what is most important is to deal with disaster risk reduction. So these are the 4 things that we've kept in our mind in terms of how we move forward. Now let me show you how that works out. There are 7 things. We can't do everything at one stage. Systematic. The first stage is forest, landscape restoration, watershed restoration, wildlife conservation. Second is promotion of clean energy and urban resilience. Third is connecting that to sustainable water, etc., etc. Now, gender is a very important thing. How can you do that? If we give them sustainable livelihood, then guess what? We can deal with gender. Until we give farmers a sustainable livelihood, we cannot deal with gender. Let me give you an example of one of the villages. Ashok went to one of the villages and the farmer said, no matter what the government says, our children have to work in the fields. We are not going to send them to school or get them educated. Through dialogue, they came along and said, aha, but the children stop working at 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock in the evening when it gets too hot or the sun goes down. Give us electricity in a 1-room schoolhouse. We'll build a schoolhouse. You give us the electricity so our children can study after work. That was a win-win situation. Once you've got that sort of thing going on, then we can think in terms of gender equality and things along those lines. When all these things are connected, then we can think in terms of disaster risk reduction. We cannot deal with disaster risk reduction until the foundation, a holistic foundation, has been put in place to make this happen. And that is how we have mapped it into people, planet, and progress. So now I call on Khojeste to summarize what the 2 of us have shared with you.
Well, Farrokh has basically expressed his views from an engineering, logical point of view, from a social point of view, from the point of view of how development affects human beings. Theology also deals with that, but it deals with it at the level of principle. So as far as I can see, what we've discussed this evening, the sweet spot is at the nexus of solutions which are equitable, bearable, and viable, something that Farrokh talks about. The environment must be safeguarded for the future well-being of the planet. I think that's a given. This has to be balanced with appropriate economic progress based upon the triadic interaction of tapping the source of wisdom with the good mind and processing the solution so found through the vehicle of truth to bring about ushta. In other words, ushta or happiness between the people, the planet, and progress. Zoroastrianism is firmly entrenched with the idea that the purpose of life is to be happy. And not only is it to be happy within, but it's to share this happiness with those around one, and by extension, harmony in the environment. So what Farrokh has really covered is very scientific, very logical, very methodological, and it's interesting that governments are now listening to these sort of, in a sense, revolutionary themes. But what is beautiful is that guess what? Zoroastrianism has been promoting this at the level of principle, as I think I've tried to outline to you, of how important the good mind is when we take information from both innate and acquired wisdom, and when we apply it through the process of truth, then everything else slowly begins to fall into place. So I think Farrokh and I have in that sense covered a very important theme, which is the good mind nurturing nature, a Zoroastrian perspective of sustainable development and progress. Karishma, maybe you'd like to sum up.
Thank you very much, Khojeste. Thank you, Farrokh, for sharing your wisdom with us. Thank you, Khojeste, for highlighting how the doctrine fits in with science and technology. And thank you, Dr. Ashok Das, for implementing all this at the ground level. And thank you all for being with us as we explore this together. So as Khojeste and Farrokh have outlined for us, they've also empowered us to reflect upon our own journey. The speakers have sown the seeds to facilitate this dialogue, and we now invite you to share your takeaways through this chat box that we have underneath. So let's put our minds to this nexus between people, planet, and progress. Khojeste gave us the principles of the theology. Theology that is timeless, a doctrine that is systematic and organized. Details of the Amesha Spenthas, the bounteous immortals, and the role of humans in the making wonderful, this renovation, this freshocarity of progress together. Farrokh then identified with the timeless theology and gave us a way forward that is time dependent, or indeed timely. With a thinking that is anchored in engineering design, he tied this to the listen, reflect, and decide before acting from the Zarathustra Dhyana. And he does this at every step to identify long-term goals, to be systematic in one's planning, to be organized in one's deployment, and to check before proceeding to the next step. Khojeste talked to us about the Amesha Spenthas, with the need for them to be activated in whatever we do, so that we empower ourselves to develop ourselves and to add value to the lives of others, while we work in this fellowship with all around us, all the people, as we say in the prayers of the 7 regions of the earth, and the environment through positive actions by negating all the evil forces. Farrokh talked to us about his guiding principle, that of Ushta, happiness, harmony, and contentment, so that the way forward necessitates harmony between smart machines and humans, between government, industry, and community, and between people, planet, and progress. This is also reflected in all the faiths around the world, in science, in technology, in justice and law, so that we can work as a fraternity. So as we reflect upon our own beliefs and journey, this journey of sustainable development to me seems to be anchored in the wisdom of the good mind, Mazda, both innate and acquired wisdom, so that the good mind can process this knowledge that comes from wisdom in the light of truth, Asha, the fires, so that we work towards developing desirable power, or what we call Kshatra Vairya, responsible authority that can be used for the good of others and of nature in a bi-directional approach, so that with benevolence and devotion, we can achieve holistic completeness or perfection that sustains forever through time, so that we achieve our goal to empower each other, to empower the renovation of the earth and the universe, what's called Frashokarati, and bring about harmony in all of creation as Asho Zarathustra taught us in the very first verse of the Gathas. With gratitude to Asho Zarathustra, all of you here today are speakers today. We will now address your questions in the chat box, your takeaways. So if you have anything to say, please put them in the chat box. So we have a note from Joanne Kerr, great presentation. Dr. Jyoti Prakash Naidu says, thank you for bringing philosophical aspects of religion as applicable to the United Nations SDGs and the environment. We've got a thank you earlier from Mr. Zarir Suraliwala, saying, salute to you all who are taking painstakingly thankless tasks to uplift poverty in rural environments. Kudos. Somebody comments on the extremely professional presentations by our speakers today. David Hornsby says, thank you all very much indeed. Nehra Malsad says, outstanding job. Thank you for the introduction to Farrokh Mistree. Pushtas Bangara says, thank you, Khojeste and Farrokh, for tying together Zoroastrian theology to be implemented at ground level. We have a hand raised from Behram Pastakia, who is often reflected upon the phrase Vasudeva Kutumbakam, the global world, as a fellowship. So I'll request Behram to unmute and address us if he'd like to. Behram, Dr. Pastakia.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, Behram, go ahead, please.
So thanks a lot for this presentation. The 17 SDGs are beautiful. What Abdul Kalam said was beautiful. I want to share a resource from none other than Mahatma Gandhi. In 1938, he wrote some letters, and these were compiled in a book called Hind Swaraj, or Indian Home Rule. If we look at that text, he was not talking about freedom from the British. He was not talking about getting away from colonial rule. He was talking about freedom of the individual, of the empowerment of the villagers living in their own villages and living in harmony with nature. I would refer you to that book by Navjeevan Trust. And there's a chapter which says, how can India become free? And there are chapters before that and after that which will address this issue. The bottom line is, Ashok Das is onto something beautiful. And I would endorse all of us to get behind him and with our minds, think how we can move this needle forward. For an example, in Madhya Pradesh, they have started a thing called Jal Khet. Jal is water and Khet is a field. So it was noticed that climate change has started these large downpours of water which come in a short time, and then there is lack of water. All they had to do was for the villagers to get together and dig a hole in their field. And that would bring the water in. It would refurbish the aqueduct, refurbish the underground aquifer, and the whole village turned around and we got all the prosperity and happiness that we wanted in the villages. There are similar examples in Rajasthan, where a whole river which was dry for 60 years became a perennial river because one person just went there and talked to the villagers and started saying, let's do rainwater harvesting. There was no transfer of funds from the Western world to the third world. It was all a matter of people coming together and working together for a common cause. So I want to stop here with a congratulatory note, this whole idea that all across civil society, whether we are professors or lay people or villagers or scientists or priests, whoever we are, we can all get together in fellowship and move this needle forward. So thank you, Ashok Das, for showing us the way.
Thank you very much, Dr. Behram Pastakia. We have a share from Joanne Kerr of her takeaways. Go ahead, Joanne, and thank you very much for being with us today. You need to unmute yourself, please.
Oh, there we go. Hi, everyone. I was muted by the host. So anyway, thank you. Well, congratulations. That was a great presentation and tying. Can you hear me okay?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Yeah. And tying concepts together. That's what I always look for whenever I go to a presentation. How do, everybody wants to have a solution, but it's always so focused and looking at the overall effects that happens. So of course I always tell Ashok that I think his model is fantastic, and I've been around communities for, I'm going to age myself and say I've been doing community service for over 40 years, and I was always disappointed when anyone presented a model to me on how unaware they are of traditional knowledge and community knowledge and academia. It's always like the people that are educated in formal way, because education and learning is varied. But this particular model, I think, addresses all of those. So it's not insulting to and displaces everyone, but it also brings in the spirituality and the respect. So I actually was going to be calling Ashok today because a friend of mine, I was speaking with him, he's from Africa, and I'm working with him for a model to do a project for my own project. And I said, well, I'm going to displace myself and introduce you to Ashok Das, because I think he actually has a solution you're looking for overall. So Ashok comes, I was going to call you, but I ended up being on this webinar. Thank you for inviting me. So I would like to talk about how can we get this moving and start to implement. That's my
Thank you very much.
takeaway.
Thank you very much, Joanne. What we'll do is for further dialogue, if you would drop your, put my email address in there. If any of the speakers would like to put their email addresses in, it will be their choice to further connect with all those who then want to connect with them for clarifications and dialogue and working together. But I take this opportunity to bring in Dr. Ashok Das, whose groundbreaking work we heard about from Professor Farrokh Mistree, who related it beautifully to the talk by Khojeste Mistree, for which I'm expressed my gratitude. Dr. Ashok Das, would you like to come in and address anything that you would like to bring up today?
First of all, thank you very much. I think whenever Farrokh does this, he does it much better than I do. And he articulates, and that is what I am learning from Farrokh. And actually, Farrokh has helped me shape things up. I had this mind, I had these ideas, but to bring it a little bit more systematic is where Farrokh has played a big role for me. And I really appreciate his support and all through these years. Secondly, we just heard about Mahatma Gandhi's Gram Swaraj. So actually, Mahatma Gandhi's Gram Swaraj is where I really started first. That it has to be all localized. The people have to become self-sufficient in their environment, and his focus was primarily on the local industries, okay, creating local opportunity, local industries. Where Dr. Kalam came, he brought in the concept of not only the local industry but infrastructure. What other infrastructure is needed for the villagers to stay there? It's not just about the local industry, but it's also about water. It's about education. It's about bringing together agriculture. So all of this together finally leads to the whole sustainable rural village development. And so Gandhiji's principles are always inside whatever we are trying to do, and that will always stay there. But what Kalam did is really put it all together in a holistic way and created something that how do we stop people going from village to city? That is the whole thing. Only then the burden on the cities will go down or reduce, and the villagers will become more empowered. So that is why we talk more, on the Pura model than on just the Gandhiji's model. And it's not that Gandhiji's actually the first learning came from Gandhi, right? He's the one who really said, "What is Gram Swaraj? Every community needs to be independent. How can we become independent and move towards a sustainable goal, a sustainable development?" So that is just to clarify on the two philosophies. And what we brought in on top of Pura is the technology and the digitization, the internet. Now everything is changing. So Dr. Kalam wrote it 10 years ago. Now every community is connected. So how do we bring in smart connected communities, smart connected villages with the technology and with the ICT and communication technologies that have come with the advent of internet? And that's why now we are talking about cyber physical systems, cyber physical social systems, right? That's where Farrokh and I work the most. That how do we create a cyber physical social system that we can take from anywhere, from one place to another, and provide a platform to achieve the goals that we have set for ourselves. I'll stop here.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ashok Das, for that share and for highlighting that within in fact, even Joanne did that, this wisdom, collective wisdom that we can learn from different communities, from the age-old principles of our show Zarathustra, and that are through time seen in various different aspects of life and different faiths and no faith and science and justice and equity. You've been implementing at ground level, for which I'm most grateful to you. I'm sure there are so many notes of kudos to you and to the team that you've built with Farrokh and the mentoring you've received from Farrokh, as indeed so many of us do around the world. There is a comment and a question from Rohinton and Roshan Revetna, which I'm going to address to Farrokh, if I may. Could you give us some practical pointers how each one of us can help lead a sustainable life in our daily lives? This is mainly from Rohinton. So Rohinton uncle has raised something very fundamental in the Zarathustra Dhyana and indeed even in science, that things are iterative, that things build up. I'll hand over to Farrokh, and then if Khojeste would like to address anything.
I'd like it to go the other way. I'd like Khojeste to talk first and respond to Rohinton, and then I'll piggyback.
Khojeste, please, may I ask you to come in?
Basically, I say to you that Zoroastrianism offers a way of life. It offers the way of life based upon very specific principles in our theology. The Amesha Spencers, the Yazatas, the qualities that these divine beings have. And I think a very important point to bear in mind is that the Amesha Spencers and the Yazatas each have a specific attribute. It's not that they're just gods or divine beings and therefore they represent a multiple of different aspects of life, but each divine being has a very specific attribute. And if we're able to understand at the level of principle what each attribute implies, in other words, the 30 days of the Zoroastrian calendar month, where each day is linked to a specific attribute that we need to emulate in our daily lives, I think this would then put us in a strong position to do whatever we have to do in life, whether it's sustainable development or whether it's being a good doctor or whether it's being a good architect. Zoroastrianism, I think, is probably one of the few religions in the world which actually gives one the philosophical and theological infrastructure to lead a righteous, happy life. Because in Zoroastrianism, spirituality is not something that's far removed and airy-fairy. Spirituality is living the good life. The spiritual Zoroastrian is somebody who is industrious, who's somebody who works hard, who's somebody who generates wealth and then has the ability to share it. In many other traditions, spirituality is seen as renouncing the world or becoming a monk or taking on vows of chastity, monasticism, flagellation of the body, and so on and so forth. In Zoroastrianism, it's a very this-worldly religion. And I think in a this-worldly setup that we're all in, to me, the theology works beautifully in whatever one chooses to do, whether it's in science, whether it's in medicine, whether it's in law. Zoroastrianism gives us the theological guidelines as to how we can excel in it. And I think, without sounding boastful, when you think of the number of Parsis and Iranis in the world and the contribution that they've made to the whole world, our numbers are minuscule, but our contribution is phenomenal. And I think it's phenomenal because of the strength of our Zoroastrian religion. At least that's where I'm coming from.
So I'd like to piggyback on what Khojeste has said, and I'd make it personal. For me, what is very important is knowing myself. Knowing what makes me happy. To me, that is extremely important. And that is not happiness in the sense of more money or this, that, or the other thing, but it's happiness in the context of Ushta. What gives me bliss? What makes me feel comfortable with myself, respect myself, and stuff like that? That's internal. In other words, I'm in touch with my intuitive mind. Okay? I'm in touch with my intuitive mind. The other thing that I look for is harmony. So I'm looking for Ushta internally, and the way for me to be comfortable with myself is by bringing about harmony. Now, it is not possible to do that all the time. So I learned long ago that if you are faced with an evil person or a person who you consider evil or a person who is not quite right, what you do is you disassociate yourself with that person or that thing and do more good. So it's not getting upset that this person lied to you or this person cheated you or did something like that. But we are told in our religion that the way to overcome evil is to do more good. So that is how I look at things. I can't do everything. So from time to time when Behram tells me, you should do this, you should do that, I say, I don't have the bandwidth for it. I just don't. I keep focused because I've committed myself to certain things and I will take small steps to make things happen. Perhaps this will help you organize your lives.
If I may, I just want to add one more thing. Is that I met someone here. There is a place called Navadarshanam. So one of IIT Madras alumni, he just went to a barren land and started converting it into a green land. So when I met him, he said that, all of us should ask one question. What is my footprint on the earth? And how do I minimize that footprint on the earth? And the footprint is not just where I stand, but the house I have, the transport, the energy I use, everything that I use to live is my footprint. And if we are conscious in minimizing, or Farrokh doesn't like optimize, but trying to see how do I balance my footprint so that people, planet, and progress, there is a balance between that. I mean, that is the guiding principles that I have. I try to see that I take bus, not go on car if there is a bus available. So there are small things you can do to minimize the carbon footprint, minimize the um, your footprint on the earth, and that is how we can make earth survive longer, earth go long, or life on earth survive longer. Earth will survive, but it is the life on the earth which gets impacted with the climate change. And how do we help continue that? That's my 2 cents.
Splendid. Thank you very much for that. If Khojeste would like to add in anything to that, please feel free to do that. Mr. Hushtas Bamgara says, thank you, Khojeste and Farrokh, for tying the Zoroastrian theology to be implemented at ground level. Shweta Saraf says, I thank all the speakers for their exceptional insights that they have shared. The idea is an amazing opportunity to grow together. Mr. Kasad says, please continue the good work. He thanks the speakers, and Mr. Das wishes us all the best of good health and happiness. Till somebody else has something to say, I just want to share something that reflects this concept of choice. The choice to act responsibly, think. Welcome people into our fold is an amazingly empowering principle. For example, I was welcomed into the local community by friends like Rohinton Munshi, the Malcolm Debu, Mr. Rusi Dalal. That empowered me to then work on Mr. Darais Potel. That empowered me to work on ideas that came up. I've been welcomed into the fold by Professor Farrokh Mistree, and that empowered me to think better. Mr. Meher Ramal Saad welcomed me, that allowed me to do that further. Mr. Yazdi Tatra welcomed me. So as you welcome in your own life people who come to you for your help, you're empowering them to add some value into this world. So this concept of fellowship, which is in the Zartushti Dena and in all faiths and everyone, is very empowering. As my teacher, Ervad Ramyan Karanja says, the concept of Ushi, that is knowledge, has come to us to bring Ushta, as Khojeste often focuses on, happiness and harmony. Is there anything that you want to share with us, Khojeste, on happiness and harmony? No? Okay.
There was another question from Mr. Dotiwala.
Mr. Dotiwala, would you unmute yourself and ask your question? Thank you for that. Mr. Karmesh Dotiwala says, congratulations to Khojeste, Farrokh and Mr. Ashok Das and Karishma Yazdi for a great program. Would Mr. Das, Farrokh and Khojeste consider coordinating an internship program for our Zarathushtri youth? Farrokh, may I address this question to you?
Yes. Ashok, Janet and I offer internships to students. And in fact, Vispi Karkaria is a student who did an internship with us for over a year. Published 2 papers with us. We've also offered an internship to Zain Pitawala, who worked with us for a month, and he'll be coming back in August or September to work with us for another month. So Kayamas, it's totally possible. We welcome people to work with us on internships. Right now, Janet and I are working with a student from the Delhi Technical College in India, and on an internship for 2 months during the summer. So it's totally doable. It's not a problem.
Yeah, I second that. We are also, we have many interns, and many of them have done really fantastic work with us. So one of the goals really is we need to nurture the young minds, because they are the futures. So how do we pass on whatever we have learned, whatever give them an experience of whatever we have, so that they can go on and continue this work? Because it has to continue. It is just it is a conditioning of the mind that is most important, as it has come out from this presentation today. How do we create those good minds? And we are all there to, support that. Any
So,
students?
I want to, this is for everybody. Janet and I are willing to support with funding, full funding, a person who wants to work in the area of rural development and get a PhD with us. We have two expectations. One is that person decides to return to India, and two, that person decides to be a professor. That these are not hard and fast rules, but I believe that the best job in the world is being a professor. The only thing better than that is being married to one. So here is an open offer to anybody who wants to get a PhD with us, fully funded, 5 years.
Thank you very much, Farrokh. On that note, I'd like to just read out the last couple of messages. Manik Bujwala highlights that we can transfer what we learn to our children and youth. He used to encourage his daughter about recycling. And she joined an Iranian friend, so coming together. And he involves himself with interfaith work, and they promote collaboration with people of other faiths. Rintan Munshi says, very interesting presentations, thank you. And Dr. Dolly Dastur says, thank you, Ashok Das, for innovative ideas to develop the different areas of the world in a sustainable way. Please continue with your good work. With that, may I express my gratitude to Mr. Yazdi Tatra for supporting this endeavor, the good mind nurturing nature, a Zoroastrian perspective on sustainable development for progress together. My gratitude to Dr. Farrokh Mistree and to Khojeste Mistree and to all those who have enabled this to happen, Shireen Mistree, Kayan Mistree, the entire group of people who has made this happen, and to our lovely audience here today, who has given us this wonderful energy, this vibrancy to progress.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
All of
Mr.
you.
Dr. Ashok Das, for all your good work. And all those who, like Dr. Ashok Das, are working in their own special ways. Thank you. Our gratitude to all of you. Yes, Dean, may I request you to close the meeting?